political economy and the emergence of the environmental movements in the latter half of the last century. I attempt to take an objective view of history, and having been subject to the imperial processes myself, this has not always been an easy position to take. We need to absorb the lessons of history, stop complaining about the past, and face the present. I think we are allowed to be angry about it, but not act when we are angry. And I was told once a long time ago, the way to overcome your anger is to keep reciting Surah Al-Fatiha until the anger subsides, then clear your head and think again, and then act on the basis and having shura as well. So you cool down before you act. It may not look like it, but I feel that the current global situation is a good place to be. If we did not know before that the earth is a shared space, we know it now. The coronavirus has made sure of that. And as what we describe as the greatest civilization ever devised by a man wobbles, our time has come to give the world an alternative. That is the Deen of Fitra. And more of this in my third talk in the series. So we have, in a sense, a clean sheet we can work from, because everything that we have taken for granted today has now been turned on its head by a little thing we call a microbe we can't even see. So what I'm going to do is read you a few extracts from the book, both from the sections on the House of Cards and Ravished, those two chapters. I've chosen a few sections. And the first section I'm going to read to you is about knowledge overload. It's in page 9 of the book. And here it is, a short excerpt. Cosmologists tell us that a black hole is a location in space in which the force of gravity is so strong that not even light can escape from it. If somehow we can imagine living inside this concentrated incandescence, the prevalent brilliance must be of such a magnitude that it blinds us. I feel that we are in such a predicament today in spite of all the knowledge we possess. There is so much information around us, buffeting us from all sides, and the energy of this black hole sucks in more and more knowledge to the effect that we flail about in its black dazzle, suffering from information overload. The black hole of these times manifests the modern mindset when, on the one hand, we build a particle accelerator known as the Large Hadron Collider to test different theories of particle physics, whilst on the other, we ignore the process of ecosystems collapse that these very same activities generate. So in order to construct this Large Hadron Collider, we have to, in fact, create environmental havoc, because this Large Hadron Collider is a circular tunnel running 27 kilometers under the 100 meters below the Earth's surface of the Earth. And we are then, having destroyed whole landscapes, trying to discover what happened in the earliest times of the creation of the universe. Scientists to reproduce the conditions that exist within 1/10000000th of a second after the Big Bang by colliding beams of high energy protons or ions at colossal speeds. This was the moment to discover the moment around 13.7 billion years ago, when the universe is believed to have started with an explosion of energy and matter. So I asked the question, what is the point in knowing what happened 13.7 billion years ago within 1/100000th of a second if another group of scientists is predicting the imminent collapse of ecosystems? And that I refer to, that part is not in the book, when a group of scientists about 15,000 of them, including Nobel laureates who warned the world in December last year about the imminent collapse of ecosystems. So here we are. We are one group of scientists trying to discover what happened about 13 billion years ago. Another group of scientists warning us that it's all over if we don't watch it. So that's something to think about. The other excerpt I have is, and I try to make the point in the book, in the first chapter, that Islam is a bridge, that Muslims have been a bridge since the beginning of Islam to bridge the East and the West. In reality, I asked the question: is Islam of the East or is it of the West? And I quote again, it's page 15 of the book. In reality, Islam is both of the East and of the West, epitomized in the verse, the Lord of the East, and Lord of the West, Rabbul Mashriqain wa Rabbul Maghribain, in Surah Ar-Rahman. A geographical, cultural, social, and intellectual bridge between the Orient and the Occident. The Chinese inventions of paper, printing, gunpowder, the compass, and much more all arrived in Europe thanks to the Muslim land bridge. But there has also been traffic the other way. That is, Muslims taking ideas from the Occident and carrying it in the opposite direction. And that has resulted in a kind of philosophical paradigm built by the Mu'tazilite movement as early as the earliest periods of Islam before the 12th century. The other bit that I go to is to look at where we are now. That is under the heading in the same chapter of, under the heading of a lethal cocktail. And I quote: at the time when the European world was taking over the rest of the world during the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, Europe itself was changing quite dramatically. And these changes were then imposed on the colonial countries that they were ruling. Europe was coming to terms with itself at the same time as it was consolidating an empire. And the evolving European experience in terms of the cultural, social, intellectual, political, technological, and economic was imposed upon the rest of the world, regardless of whether or not this experience was germane to local conditions. This stunted the flowering of local societies and their cultures in their own way and in their own time. The loss of cultural diversity was preceded by the loss of biodiversity by centuries. Environmentalists now talk about the loss of biodiversity, and people are now beginning to realize the results of what the coronavirus is doing, in that now the wildlife that was hidden for a long time from us now emerging in urban areas, and in fact illustrating the fact of the damaging nature of our civilization to biodiversity and to nature. So what I'm saying here is that people do not talk about the loss of cultural diversity, because cultural diversity itself protected biodiversity in the way people functioned in their own environments, in their own time and in their own place. And people were totally integrated with their own environments and protected their own biodiversity. Of course, they used what they needed to use, but they didn't exploit the natural world. So the cultural diversity was reduced to a slogan, and the world is now poorer for all those rich expressions of life that we have lost. As Europe changed, it was changing the rest of the world with it. So I make the point here that as environmentalists, are very fond of talking about the loss of biodiversity amongst the other things that we are experiencing, but they don't really realize that long before the loss of biodiversity, there was a huge loss of cultural diversity, and civilizations were drastically changed, and local communities were forced to change their ways by the introduction of the Western European paradigm on the rest of us. And I conclude the first chapter, House of Cards, with these words. This then is a house of cards we inhabit, built layer upon layer with what modernity represents. The first layer consists of the banks, which excretes phantom money, that is the cement that holds the fragile edifice together, on top of which is built the nation state, industry, trade, business, large and small organizations, education, health, housing and social services, communications, and all the multifarious institutions that keep our lives moving, all depending on the individual as a consumer and a source of tax at the top of this rickety edifice. This is epitomized in a verse in the Quran in Surah Nur, which Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. ظلمات في بحر لجي يغشاه موج من فوقه موج من فوقه سحاب ظلمات بعضها فوق بعض. And it translates like this: or there are shadows upon a sea obscure, covered by a billow, above which is a billow, above which are clouds, shadows piled one upon another. When he puts his hand forward, well nigh he cannot see it. So this is covered, and we function as if though life is normal, not realizing that so many layers to the kind of society that we are living today that can be uncovered layer upon layer, and at the bottom of this we discover, as we'll come to it eventually, the whole banking edifice that supports this whole system together. And that's why I call the first, I named the first chapter of the book A House of Cards, because it is on tenuous footings. It's on very flimsy foundations. Now to the second part of the book. The second chapter of the book is called A Ravished Earth. And the point I make there is that people living in modern society today are disconnected. We are living in an entity which we are disconnected from. We never consider ourselves, although we breathe the clean air that Allah has given us, we drink the clean water that Allah has given us, we never consider ourselves or stop to think that we are in fact part of a larger, a bigger entity, which we call the natural world. We are disconnected from it. Having been disconnected from it, we can carry on to be the kind of consumers we are, not thinking of where our rizq comes from, and where our waste goes to, and what we do with our waste, and plastic being a huge problem. And so I say that we need to reconnect. And how do we reconnect? And this is the kind of questions we find answers to in the Quran and the Hadith literature, and that we need to go back to. Which I will deal with in one of the future sessions. But at this point in time, I want to look at the system of the earth itself and see where our disconnections come from. And I quote here from page 41. The earth is a closed system. Everything life has ever needed through ages of time has been made available to us through this system, by this system. Perversely, we can understand this better today using the technology we have created, considering how astronauts can live in space in small capsules over long periods of time. Scientists have copied the Earth's self-contained survival system and applied it to space travel. In this sense, planet Earth could be linked to a spaceship. The most visible, commonplace example of this closed system is the rain cycle. Another system that is crucial to life on Earth is the carbon cycle. It maintains the climate balance, mizan in the parlance of the Quran, by regularizing the flow of carbon dioxide. What we have done is, because we live in an energy hungry kind of society that we have created for ourselves, there's very little we can do without flicking a switch, turning a knob, or punching a keyboard. And what all this does is to give us more energy. And this energy comes from fossil fuels, carbon. Now we're trying to go green. So also a cautionary note, going green also means we are so desperate to find this new energy source that we can go green and still live the kind of lifestyles that we have been used to. But this is also a non-starter, you see, because the thirst for green energy is to enable us to continue to live the way that we have been living without fossil fuels. Okay, if we get away from fossil fuels, we'll still be taxing the environment in the kind of lifestyles that we have been living, we've been used to, and we want to live in the future. So that's also a non-starter. This is, again, I'm arguing for a totally fresh thinking of where we are and what we have to do in order to leave a kind of livable planet for our children and grandchildren. So the carbon thing is a balance between terrestrial carbon, oceanic carbon, and atmospheric carbon. That balance is gone now, and now we are suffering the consequences of it. There were natural changes to the carbon cycle in the past that induced climate change, but human-generated carbon dioxide since the Industrial Revolution has disrupted the carbon equation once again. So we are living in a kind of world that we have created for ourselves, going against the kind of creational paradigm, the kind of balance, the mizan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Okay, again, concentrate, looking at the second chapter, Ravished Earth. I would like to tell you something about pollution, the pollution boomerang, and how it affects us. I was at a conference in San Francisco about 20 years ago, the kind of conference that President Reagan and the experience of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev, attended. And one of the, I remember this vividly, one speaker was a young woman called Theo Coburn. She was a scientist working for the World Wildlife Fund. And she stood up. She cut a small figure, but then she stood up with a great deal of authority, stabbing the finger at the audience and said, "Do you know there are more than 200 poisons in your body which your grandparents did not have?" That means you, the people at this event now who are listening to me talking, my family, your families, we all have poisons in our body. And of course, interestingly, COVID-19 has been a wake-up call. The only poison that we can discover that we have created for ourselves is this now, and it's shut us down. But we have been living with these poisons for all our lives, and we will continue to do so until we change the paradigm completely. And here's a quote. "There is now a class of artificial chemicals known as endocrine disruptors, which are described as persistent organic pollutants, POPs for short. They are known to interfere with the body's endocrine system and produce adverse developmental, reproductive, neurological, and immune effects in both humans and wildlife." That's the quote. POPs are found in many everyday products, including plastic bottles, metal, metal food cans, detergents, flame retardants, food, toys, cosmetics, pesticides. Research shows that endocrine disruptors may pose the greatest risk during prenatal and postnatal development when organ and neural systems are forming. That was in a book, that was a quote from a book called Our Stolen Futures, written by Theo Coburn. My next quote comes from a chapter section entitled "Abusing Abundance," and it's what I call it a delayed reaction. I have been asked for good news, and it is not that I have been reluctant to do so in the book, but I felt that I needed to warn the potential readership about the kind of dangers that we are facing whilst we lead our lives as normal. And I hesitate to say that any progress that is seen as being made is in most of these endeavors is temporary and illusory. This is because the issues are systemic and they are related to the foundations that hold up modernity. I will attempt to give answers in the concluding chapters of this book, but in the next two chapters, which I will discuss next week, inshallah, I will try and map out the route that we have been taking in order to get into this untenable situation where we are all now in a lockdown situation. And so it's a hard road, but the solutions are there. And if we only look at what the deen, what we call the deen al fitra has to offer. And again, I conclude this session by quoting from Surah Rum, which has now become quite a familiar ayat amongst Muslims who are looking at the environmental issues. It begins, "Zahra al-fasada fil barri wal bahri bima kasabat aydin nas liyudhiqakum ba'da alladhi amal yarji'un." Corruption has appeared in the land and sea, for that men's own hands have earned, that He, Allah, may let them taste some part of that which they have done, that perhaps they may return to sanity, to some kind of sanity. So, in summary, what I'm saying is that the house of cards that I describe the current civilizational model that we are living as a house of cards, that is very unstable. And that, in fact, came home to me, and I think I say this in the latest talking point issue that's gone out on Rule by Virus, where the United Nations Development Agency was worried about the repeat of the 2008 financial global breakdown, where it nearly scuppered the whole global system. And they were warning in advance of what we can expect in another 4 or 5 years. That was the thing I received in January. But lo and behold, it's happened now. So we didn't have to wait for another financial breakdown to tell us the lessons of what the economics would look like if there was some kind of a global breakdown. There is one now. And people are wondering what kind of a recovery can we make. So in a sense, what I'm saying here is that our time has come. That there is a totally comprehensive message in the Islamic paradigm that we can now, if we do not know it already, begin to absorb it and then begin to practice it ourselves. And if we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. And we have left the earth, or we have created an earth for ourselves that will not have a future if we carry on like this. So we have to change and change drastically. And the model is there. So Adnan, I rest my case and I open it up to questions, and let's talk. Bismillah.
Yeah. So I've just posted in the speech bubble. If people can see in the middle of the screen, there is a speech bubble where you can, if you click on that, and there's a conversation on the right hand side which you can put into the meeting chat. Any questions that you have for Haj Fazlin? I'd prefer to do it that way. If nobody's got any questions at the moment, I'll ask a question and that could possibly prompt other people. So Haj Fazlin, I mean, you've talked about the House of Cards and you've talked about some of the things that could be done in
Hello? I've lost you. Adnan, I've lost you. Hello?
He might have got disconnected.
Ah.
So I'm sure he'll come back on in a second.
Yeah, okay.
If anybody's got any questions, like Adnan said, if you could put them in the message. Sidi Fazlin, have you got can you see the chat?
I can see yeah, hang on. Adnan's coming on. hang on. Adnan's. Adnan, I can't hear you, but I can hear other participants. I'm speaking to Khalid man now.
Right, okay. Are you sure you don't have any technical problems on your side?
It seems to be working. Khalid, is that you speaking?
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Khalid is on. I can hear him. I can hear Shabir.
Maybe you should ask the questions direct, because not everyone's got this. Fazlin, can you see the comments?
Comment. Where is that?
There's a question by Richard Goodall.
Just fire away with the questions.
Richard Goodall, RG. Yes. I see Richard. Abdul Razak. Yeah. I can see that. Meeting chat. Yes. Yeah.
Can you see his question? It says, I'd like Sidi Fazlin to comment on the saying that the love of money is the root of all evil.
Abdul Razak. Okay. Yeah. You're trying to get me to be philosophical here, Abdul Razak. Right. Well, I mean, let me answer this in this way. I mean, the problem is this: we are living in a consumer society. That's one thing, but it's also a fact that we compete with each other in trying to get the latest gizmos and latest gadgets, so that this is the kind of technology that we're using now, thanks to the coronavirus. So obviously we need the fulus and the dirhams and whatever to help us deal with the kind of technology that we can show where we are up to date with the kind of electronics that people want to sell us and we want to possess. But looking at the other side, Islam is not anti-materialist. In a sense, it is also not anti-money. Allah wants us. There's a verse in the Quran which says, "Wear your best apparel and be sociable. Go out and be sociable." So Allah wants us to feel good and be good, and wear good things and eat good food, but bearing in mind there are also good times and bad times. Just to share with what you have, share with others what you have. You see, so The problem today is that we have confused wants with needs, and we are made to want things today that didn't exist yesterday, thanks to the advertising industry. And in order to want these things, like the gizmos that we use to have this kind of conversation, is that we need to possess the kind of money that can give us these things. You see, so the idea is for us as Muslims to look at the way that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam functioned during his time, and repeatedly we see that he went without food. He did not. He had only 2 cloaks, one to the wash and one to wear. So that's my answer to you.
Okay, Sidi Fazlin, you've got another couple of questions here.
Yeah.
What are the 5 steps we should take as a community moving forward? Doesn't have to be 5, but key priorities.
5 steps we need to take moving forward. That's an interesting one.
Doesn't have to be 5, but what would be the key priorities?
I think first of all, we need to understand where we are. You know, are we in the fitra? Are we not? We are not. We are far away from the fitra. And we also need to understand that we are, half of the deen is what we call the mu'amalat. And there is no mu'amalat today. There is ibadat, the 5 pillars. And
can you just explain mu'amalat just very briefly for listeners?
Mu'amalat is the externalities of conducting business, conducting transactions. And I also put it that knowing about the environment and dealing with the environment also part of it. It's all integrated. Mu'amalat is integrated. There is one part of the ibadat, which is zakat, which is a kind of conjunction between ibadat and mu'amalat, is zakat, because when you're looking at how other people function, you're looking at the poor, the destitute, you're looking at the travelers, you're looking at the people who come to Islam. So you're looking at externalities. So mu'amalat is in fact a kind of a hidden pillar, if you like, which is not in fact taken seriously today. So we need to move into that dimension. So there are ways of doing this, and which is to set up business transactions, or if you talk environmentally, 5 steps is to consume wisely, is to reduce your consumption, is to recycle what you've consumed, and to have a kind of measure of the kind of things that we are dealing with, looking at the wider world and the kind of waste, to reduce the amount of waste that we generate. There are 3 things already there: reduce, reuse, recycle, of the 5 that we watched in terms of our daily existence. See, and then we move on to the wider aspect of life and the kind of business transactions that we can generate with each other, and the kind of setting up a waqf, and how we could deal with people who are less well off and who are more needy. So there are multifarious things. We can set up an education program to look at this whole new aspect of the environment now, which is occupying most of our time. I hope that I've given enough there for somebody to think about.
Okay, another question from Bushraz. Can you advise how we can spread this message among younger generation? Hopefully they will be listening to this in the future. It's a good question.
Yes, thank you for that, Bushra. I think we can live by example. The younger generation, until they're left school, 15, 16, 17, and they're looking for jobs and or going out into higher education or looking for jobs, they are with us. They live with us. So we can live by example, showing them how to consume or how not to consume, what consumerism is about. And again, I repeat what I said earlier on: reduce, reuse, recycle. About how you use energy, about how you share and how you care. I think one sage said there's enough in the world to if you care, there's enough in the world to share with other people. So I think the short answer to that one, Bushra, is to live by example, and to it is difficult today because Muslim households are just one or two in the streets of other households. So how can we then to let other people know about the wider picture that Islam paints, and the depth it goes to in the way that we ought to live. And I say that in environmental terms, there is no such thing as environmentalism in Islam, because if you follow the Sunnah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you are an environmentalist, which means that you follow the Sunnah and you take as little as possible from the earth, and you only take what you need, and you give out the rest. And that's the example.
Okay. Big problem seems to be how people view money. How can we change that?
I think in the short term you can't. In the short term you can't. I mean, what I advocate in the book, and here I'm jumping the gun a bit, and I deal with it in future chapters, because if you live in a society which we subscribe to 100%, because we are living in it, we have no other choice. We are living in a society which is driven by what you call the growth agenda, and we need our salaries to grow, our rizq to grow, in order so that our consumerism can grow. So we need to sort of, if we want to turn the clock back and go back to natural currencies and overturn the whole system, there'll be utter and total chaos. We need to have a pathway that shows us a way to redeem ourselves from the current situation, to get back to a fitra kind of situation. Now, I say it in interesting ways. Wallahu khairul makirin. Allah is the best of planners, and He has sent us this COVID-19, which may possibly be the first step to rediscovering a path to some kind of sanity. We are all locked in. We cannot do anything. The natural world is coming back to life. Fishes are coming back to the rivers. The coral is beginning to regenerate. The turtles are nesting once again in the beaches of Thailand, which was infested by tourists not so very long ago. So there is a kind of a redeeming feature, whether we like it or not, a redeeming feature in what is happening now, because Allah is showing us that we can still live. Inshallah, soon we'll be out of the lockdown situation. We can still live by introduced what we call comparing it with today's paradigm. Still live in reduced circumstances and reducing the financial dependency.
But
Yeah.
that should make it that it overlaps with
There he is.
yeah.
Sorry.
No, somebody forgot to put themselves on mute. I've just muted them. That's fine. So another question I have is, in your book in the House of Cards, Sidi Fazlin, you talk about the financial meltdown of 2008.
Yeah.
Statements such as the banks are too big to fail under the semi-chapter Democracy and the Nature of Money. How do you see the 2008 or the post-coming collapse? How do you see that in comparison with 2008?
I think it'll be worse. I mean, a collapse was predicted in 2025, and this is what the United Nations Environment Development Agency was saying we have to be careful. This was in January. The UNDP was saying that we had to be careful and not succumb to another financial crisis. They were warning us in January. But lo and behold, it's happened now. Another financial crisis, another economic crisis has happened now. It is a kind of a advanced warning of what we can expect if there was a global downturn. You see, but when we look at global downturns in economic terms, we also see this as negative. But we should look at it another way. There are lots of positive things here in the way that the natural world is recovering. You see, and we can make something of this and begin to articulate what Islam says about riba and the consequences of it. You know, it's like the verse in the Quran is that we do sujood to shaitan, and if we do not learn the lessons of the COVID-19 is giving us, in about 10 years or 15 years time, there's going to be a big change in the way that climate change is going to treat us if we don't deal with it very quickly. And that is, it will be worse than COVID-19 because it'll be a total and permanent change in the way that the ecosystems and the earth works. And that means we have to have another system altogether. And this is what I'm saying, that as Muslims, we have a paradigm to offer. We have a different set of values to offer. And we can begin to articulate this and live it so that other people can follow. So in a sense, what's happening for us is I would also look at this very positively and say, this is a gift from Allah to the Muslims to say, you have to live the way of the Rasul in order to make a difference to the global situation. And we have the template to do it, both starting from the financial standpoint and also from the issues of the wider fitra.
So just one last question, Haj Fazlan. Do you think we should be living off the grid?
If we can, as much as we can, why not? So we have to turn our back gardens. So Adnan, you have to turn your patch of land at the back to a vegetable garden.
I've already tried.
Rizwan will have something to say about this because I know he's got some organic crops growing himself, and you know, there are lessons to learn. You know, yes, of course, we have to learn to live off the grid now, because when it comes real time, when these things come in real time, there are going to be problems. So we have also, in response to Bushrar's question about how do we teach the young children, you know, we need to teach them also to live off the grid, grow your own vegetables and your chickens and goats and whatever you have, and live off the land, and be less beholden to supermarkets and the high streets.
Yeah. Comment from Rizwan. I learnt of an allotment owner who saved an average of £5,000 on annual food bills. Wow, that's not bad.
Yeah, we let Rizwan on a masterclass here, actually.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's 5 minutes to finish. So if there's not any further questions, then we can end with Fatiha. No more questions? Sayyid Fazlan, we just end with Fatiha then.
Fatiha, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim, siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim, ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun alal mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Okay, thanks everybody for attending. So inshallah, next time at the same time, hopefully people don't have any access problems, and we should be continuing on the next two chapters. The next two chapters are 3 and 4, in fact.
I think,
Prosperity in perspective,
yeah. And
how history accelerated.
yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be discussing that next week. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. But he's gone. Thank you.